Bill Simpson, welcome to Transformation. So good to see you again. It's been a while.
Mark Wiley, great to see you, man. Yes, it has been some time, and so good to see your face.
I'm so glad to see your podcast, Men on the Path to Love. I started listening to it and I didn't realize it was you. But the voice was like, okay, I think
That
I
guy.
think that's Bill, or he sounds familiar. And then I found it was you, and I had to reach out and connect with you because so many men are struggling, uh, well, always through time, women too, but it's good that men have a support, and we
Sure,
struggle with relationships and trying to figure out in any relationship, how to be a good partner is really difficult, you know.
sure is. Both sexes, no matter who you are, it's a challenge, and men have been conditioned in a way that's made it challenging as well.
Yeah. It's like we have certain roles and expectations we're trying to live up to, but now we're in this kind of metrosexual space, kind of. And, men are like, hey, I can wear pink and I can, drink a Cosmopolitan if I like. Like, what's the big
Right,
deal? But,
right.
but then, like, those outer things are seem to be easier for men to adopt these days than how do they relate to their partners or then spouses, to
Right,
get
right.
to that point. And when you're in love, it's like you don't want to hurt the other person, but sometimes you don't know. We weren't brought up how to do. I think the younger kids now will be brought up a little bit more,
Hmm.
um, balanced in that way. What
Yeah.
do you find is among? I mean, there's just so many great things that you talk about on the podcast, and you're conversing with men, and you coach men in these things. And what is kind of a common theme that you see through that we're struggling, or a couple of things maybe that are like real touchstones for the need of help or guidance?
Yeah, I think the first thing that just popped in my mind, Mark, is excuse me, is the need to be recognized,
Mm-hmm.
to recognize what I am doing versus what I'm not doing,
Mm.
and that's a big one. And also, I work at a health clinic. The past 10 years, I've been a mind body educator and integrative therapy practitioner there, and I do coaching there as part of many hats that I wear. And the men I've worked with, they come in with that, oh, she's always on me, and it's complaining, complaining, complaining. So, it's they want to get that recognition. And the other side of that is kind of earning that recognition and ways to get it. And on the other side of that, most of my patients at the health clinic are women. I'd say about 80%.
Mm.
So I would hear the same thing over and over about the men that they love and want to be in a relationship with, and they're just frustrated. And I'm like, you know, that's an easy fix, that particular issue, or that. So it's just a little tweaking if they just be open their minds to it. And I said, well, okay, I think I've got something here that men need and women need as well.
Right.
And and the other side of that was someone who's been through three divorces, and
Practice.
now and now yeah, and now and I've been with my wife now for almost 17 years,
Wow.
and I finally learned how to do it right. So I want to pay that forward, and so yeah, so it's getting that recognition, and I think what women want most from men, at least the women that I've talked to, is vulnerability and empathy. Those
No.
are those are the two big ones.
Well,
And
those are big because men aren't or haven't been historically brought up to show their vulnerability,
that's right.
right?
Vulnerability is weakness, and we
Right.
can't show our weakness.
And it's hard to be, I think it's difficult to be empathetic towards someone when you're not allowed to be empathetic of yourself or reflecting on your own issue. Like if you never feel vulnerable or let yourself feel vulnerable, how do you be empathetic towards someone else rather than just sympathetic,
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it starts with themselves. That's as a coach, that's where I start first, is having that
Mm.
empathy for themselves and allowing themselves to feel and recognize that feeling and being vulnerable enough to at least acknowledge it within themselves first.
Mm.
That's a challenge. And once they open up to that, then they're more free now to open up in their relationship.
Hmm. Do you find that the men that you're talking with are hesitant or slow? I guess slow is the word to come around to the idea that it's, sometimes it could be their fault. She's always on you for a reason. I mean, people aren't on people for a non-reason, even if it's emotional, it's still a reason
Yeah. Those who come to me are open to it. So
already.
I'd say
Mm,
intellectually, they're open to it. It's the practicing of it that's the challenge.
hmm.
It's taking action. And there's a lot of pushback, because it's hard. Or it can be hard to change how you've been for, 10, 20, 30 years, who knows?
Yeah.
And so what I try to instill is that it takes patience, it takes grace, and it takes compassion for themselves to realize how hard this is. And my whole thing is in relationship, if you're struggling and the guy says, "Hey, I'm going to this relationship coach," there's nothing more you can ask for because he's trying.
Right.
And a lot of guys will give lip service. Yeah, 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 I'll do better. I'll do this so that they can get her back or him back on their good side. But what's real is that they don't. They just fall back into their old patterns. And when they can, embrace growth and really be willing to do what they have to do to grow, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
And they're going to drop the ball. We don't just learn something and then we've got it and we're going to be perfect. No,
Right.
it's, the mind, it takes time to get out of those old subconscious patterns so we can, really live in the present and be conscious of our actions.
Hmm.
And that takes time. It's a process.
Yeah, I think what you just said that men are always saying, "I know, I've done it my whole life," and I'm sure that we're always saying, like, "Hey, I'll do better. I promise you better." You don't want to hurt your partner. You don't want to lose your partner if you truly love them, and of course, you mean in that moment that you will change. But like you're saying, the subconscious pattern and the triggers are all hardwired in. So unless they actually learn how to reframe themselves or their thoughts or their perceptions, the behavior is going to come back again and again.
Absolutely. And it's going to come back again and again regardless.
Right.
Just being conscious of, oh, there's that old pattern. Let me steer it back.
Right.
And that's really what it's all about. And being open to feedback from your spouse or partner as a gauge, because
Mm.
it's their experience. Something I say a lot is reality is in the eye of the receiver. So you may be trying really hard and you think you're doing it, but what's real is it landing with your spouse or partner?
Right.
And they're the ones that, are the gatekeepers of that. And as long as they're doing it, in a sincere way versus using it against you, that's a different story. But if you're willing to take that feedback instead of getting defensive, oh no, well I tried and I did this and I did that, well you're not hearing her. You want to hear what she has to say, and it doesn't mean she's right. It doesn't mean she's
Right.
wrong. It just means that's her experience, and that's where the empathy comes in. You can validate the experience, and you may not even have to make the change. She just wants to be seen or heard. But
Yeah.
getting defensive right out of the gate, that's gonna just shut things down right away.
You said a word, and one of the things that I was new to in relationship with my wife now, we've been together about 15 years
Right.
after being divorced with kids. I've got two, she's got two from a previous, we blended a
Yeah,
whole
same here.
thing.
Same here.
Yeah, yep, yep. But it was always about, she always would say to me, "You need to validate my feelings. I need to feel heard." And
Exactly.
I had to go, we went to counseling and I had to learn that how do you listen to somebody to understand rather than to form a response to win, right?
Exactly.
And then how do you let them know they've been heard? And the way, I ended up learning to doing was when I remember to do it was to
Yeah,
repeat back to her what I think she just said. Like, this is what I heard, and she'll say that's right, or no, you missed this part, or whatever. And that's really helped us from our tensions and really we've gotten to a good place. It took a long time, but we're
Yeah,
here.
well, that's awesome that you're open to
Yeah,
that. And yeah, it's trial and error. You try, you get, like you said, I'm trying to remember to do this because you're just so used to reacting or responding in a certain way. And
right.
yeah, that reflective listening is powerful because it slows you down and you really get to hear. And if you're listening just to understand her experience versus listening to, I'm going to say my piece and I'm going to show her that I'm right, that's what it's all about, is listening to see where she's coming from.
Hmm.
And again, whether it's right or wrong doesn't matter. It's just you want to validate that. And sometimes, excuse me, sometimes that's all you need. And because that's all she needs, because if she doesn't feel validated, she's going to shut down.
Yeah. I think one of the important things I've learned also is about um, being clear on expectations of relationships earlier
Yeah,
rather than later. Like if the woman really wants to have a child in X amount of years and you don't even know if she's the one, let alone do you want a child, and you're just hanging on because you're insecure, don't want to be alone, or, maybe I will change later. It's really not fair to that other person.
right.
And she's trying to set the expectation. I want kids eventually, preferably in this window that's safe and healthy for me. How do you, because I know, guys date around and women date around too. I don't mean it to seem
I get
slimy, but
it.
guys are dating and they're dating different people, and so we're women, but we're talking about men, and they're meeting different women, and they might meet someone they really like. And I think setting those expectations are important, and also hearing them from the other partner. How do you kind of coach men to kind of think in those terms also?
Well, it's just important to be open with your communications and
Yeah.
what you need and what you expect in a relationship. And again, it goes back to them getting clear about what they want. You know,
Right.
you can't tell you how many times I heard, are we good? Talking to their,
Right.
or, is that good for you? And I, well, no, what do I need? You bring what you need to the table,
Right.
and your expectations. And if she does the same, then And I had a couple that, he wanted kids and she absolutely didn't. And they were married.
Oh boy.
And they ended up getting a divorce because of that reason.
Yeah.
Because there's only a certain amount of time where that can happen, and they'd already been together for like 6, 7 years, So it's so important to be upfront before you get into any kind of committed relationship so that you know what each other expects.
Right.
And then talking about expectations, that is also a tricky thing because when we have expectations, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times when I've worked with couples, well, he should just know, you know. And
Yeah.
I'm like, how is
Sure.
he gonna know?
Sure.
You know, well, I've told him 4 or 5 times, and he should, well, and he still doesn't know, whatever.
Yeah.
But the thing is being open with your expectations, what you need in a relationship. When I met my wife, I was ready to give up on relationships because I'd been through 3 divorces. I went from a 27-room house to living in one room in some guy's house. And then I lost my radio job back in the day. So
Right.
I was unemployed, married, divorced, had 2 kids. I did not look good
Oh,
on paper. And I don't know, I guess it was about 8 months or so later, I'm in meditation and like Rafiki from The Lion King says, "It is time." And I'm
you
like,
got the
what?
message.
You got to be kidding. And it was so strong that I said,
Wow.
okay. And I set up a profile on this website it was called Conscious Match.
Hmm.
And my now wife had been on Spiritual Singles, which apparently they merged together.
Okay.
Well, I put it all out there, and 3 days later, I get poked by my now wife, and I told her everything. I just spilled it out before we even talked on the phone.
Yeah.
I mean, we
It's like,
did values clarification. I mean, we just went through the whole nine.
eh,
And the fact that I've been
that's
divorced
awesome.
3 times, she was like, "Well, at least you believe in marriage."
Right. Right.
And so after we got all that out and we kind of checked the boxes, that's when we started talking on the phone, and then we ended up meeting each other, and here we are 17, almost 17 years later, and
Amazing.
it's just amazing. And I say all that to say that's why it's so important to understand what you need in the relationship and to put it out there. You know, maybe not on the first date, if you're dating someone, but, really get clear because otherwise you're wasting time.
Right.
It's like, you know, life's too short. What I've learned is life's too short not to put out what you want and what you need.
Yeah.
And if that person doesn't have it and can't offer and can't give you what you need, then it's time to move on. Go to where you're going to find that person.
Yeah.
It may not be on, whatever you're swiping on the app or at the bar, if you're looking for a committed relationship and all that stuff.
You got to go to the right places, you know. Yeah.
Exactly.
Being at singles night's not going to get you. You're probably your lifelong partner, you know.
Well,
It
yeah, it
might.
depends on, yeah, it depends
Yeah.
on what that nights is, but
On what you want. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
exactly.
met my current wife on Match.com. I was there on 7 years,
Mm-hmm.
at more first dates than anything because I was like, I've got kids. They're so important to me. They were young. I'm not making this
Yeah.
mistake again. So I was like, one and done, one and done, like red flags. Like I knew exactly what I wanted at that time that I thought. And
Mm-hmm.
I was in my last week and I wasn't going to re-up after 7 years. I was like, this is costing too much and time, emotion, money,
Yeah.
checking things and whatever. And my wife went on her first week and I met her on her third day. And we just
Mm.
talked on the phone first and then we went on a date and then that was it. How
Wow.
how lucky is she that she found me so quickly?
There you go. There you go.
You know, I'm not arrogant.
You're both lucky,
Lucky
Mark. You're
girl.
both lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was like perfect timing.
Yeah.
Like if I had jumped out a week earlier, she had come in a week later. And, we try to always be evolutionary partners of just helping each other evolve. And it's been the first 5 or 6 years were tough.
Mm-hmm.
We're got different parenting, beliefs and
Definitely.
skills,
Yeah.
and we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to blend and take our time and all this stuff. But we both knew there was something deeper there, and you know, now we do fabulous. I mean, I'm so shocked that
Mm-hmm.
I could be feel so good in a relationship and not always being worried of losing someone or I'm always hurting them or they're always letting me down, you know.
Right.
And the phrase you said, "We good." How many times did I say, "All right, we good"? Because I want to get out of trouble. You don't want to be in
Exactly.
trouble with the boss, right?
Right.
So you're
Yeah.
like, all right, we're good. So like, for now, but doesn't mean we're really good. And sometimes she would just say, yeah, just to let me off the hook, or vice
Mm-hmm.
versa, And it's like we're not good until this resolves somehow, whatever the issue is.
And what I appreciate what you're saying, Mark, is that you stuck it out.
Yeah,
So many times, it's couples are so easy to throw in the towel or one of the two. And,
yeah,
true commitment in relationship is working out all the rough spots, the tight spots. My wife and I call them tight spots. And knowing that I'm committed here for the long term of this relationship.
yeah,
You may not get something short term, but it's a long term gain because the more effort you put into it, and I love that you said the evolutionary part of your relationship. It's you're allowing each other to evolve mutually, for yourselves and for each other. And my thing is, I want to do good for my wife because I want to, not because she
right,
wants to do these things. I want to make her happy and she wants to make me happy. And it's not a codependency thing. It's just how we are in relationship.
right,
And even if it's a struggle, it's committing to the long term to say, hey, we're going to get through this and
yeah,
having faith that you can. And if you can't, reach out and get some help like you did. And with that, and you're both committed to that growth, again, what more can you ask for?
Yeah. Yeah. You had a recent one of your recent podcasts. I think the was titled "What Men Should Be Talking About" or "What Should Men Be Talking About After Breakup or Divorce." And
Yeah.
and I think that for both men and women, but I think in general, people break up and they want to rebound, or they go out too fast and they don't spend any time reflecting or thinking about stuff. So if you could give us a snapshot of those ideas and concepts that you were sharing, that would be terrific.
Well, like I mentioned, it's looking at yourself first. And yeah, most guys are like, and I'd say the worst advice you can give a divorced guy or a guy who's broken up from a committed relationship is get back out there, get back on the horse, man, go out there and do it. Because chances are you're just going to repeat the same thing over and over if you don't look at yourself. And so you're going to repeat these patterns and you're wondering why all women are this way, because you keep finding the same woman. Well, it's because of your own patterns. So that's the first thing is to really recognize your patterns. Really looking at yourself and thinking about your relationship, being honest with yourself, your past relationships. What did I bring to these relationships? What feedback did I get consistently over those relationships that I need to take a look at?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard thing for anyone to do, and especially us guys. We don't want to hear that. It's an ego buster. We got to break down the ego. But once you recognize those patterns, it's the next step I work with is self-compassion,
Mm.
is to have grace for what you've been through. And so many times I know I've been past relationships where I just felt like I was just terrible and I did everything wrong. She was perfect and I sucked. And I had to have compassion for that part of me. It takes two to be in a relationship. And
Mm.
so it's not all me, it's not all her. I just had to own what I did. And when I came to terms with that and had compassion for myself instead of beating myself up, saying, "Oh, you're such a jerk. You shouldn't have done that," or blah 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 blah. It's like, I did the best I could in those situations, and now I'm invested in my growth. I'm committed to my growth, and I'm going to keep on keeping on and do the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
So having that self compassion, and then also looking at what you want and need in a relationship. What does love and relationship mean to you? Before you get out there, because if you're just looking to hook up, then that's a whole different story. And don't expect a long-term relationship out of that. And if you're really clear about what a relationship means, yeah, you have that attraction phase, and you're all hot, and it's all, you know, butterflies and all that stuff, and it's exciting. And then you get to that conflict stage where you start having differences, and that's where it gets tricky. If you're not sticking around through that, you just, you see the red flags and you jump, and that's it. Well, you're not really giving the relationship a chance. So again, getting clear about what it is to be in a relationship for you. What do you want in a partner? Instead of just seeing what's out there or just coming from a place of attraction. Yeah, attraction's important, chemistry is important, but there's a lot more to it than that to have to sustain a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
So once you're really clear about what you want in a relationship, then it's time to really look at some relationship skills. Learn about how to be vulnerable, learn about empathy. That reflective listening, like you were saying earlier. These tools, learning these tools, how to communicate and be in relationship better. Then you're ready to, put those into practice, and then you can start going to the right places or looking for love in the right places,
Right.
that you're going to find that person that is interested in whatever you want them to be or whatever you want to have in common with them, versus going to some place where you're never going to get that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically the process. And
Yeah.
it's it's easy to understand that. Taking action and doing it, it's a whole different story. But the main thing is to slow down after you've been through that, because going through divorce, going through a major breakup, I mean, it takes a lot out of you, and it's just temporary. You're not broken; you're just rebuilding. And when you look at it from that perspective of I'm rebuilding and doing it with intention, doing it from a conscious place, and willing to commit to personal growth for you as well as your relationship, and miracles happen. That's where it all
Believe
changes.
it.
Yeah.
I believe it. Those are a lot of great things, and it all needs to be done. And I think it's really hard when your car's moving at 60 miles an hour and you've got to slow it back down to 20 and
Mm,
stay there for a while because you've been cruising in this kind of behavior loop for a long time. And it's
exactly.
not just the person I think that you just broke up with or divorced, it's the how many people before them as well, because obviously something's not changed.
Exactly.
And I know you talk about the trauma body, and I'd like to talk about that. And I'm wondering if, well, some of that relates back to childhood traumas of different ways, and traumas in relationships, of course, and how we hold that in our body, and it becomes multiple triggers for us.
Sure. The trauma bonding is an attachment style that really comes from our previous traumas in childhood, or previous relationships. And it's not so much that, oh, I was traumatized and I'm bringing this to the relationship. It's how you, like, say, for example, my trauma was my parents got divorced when I was around 6. When I was 8, my mom gave custody to my dad,
Mm.
and I didn't see her after that. And then she died when I was 13.
Oh my gosh.
So at 8, that was it.
Wow. That's
She
rough.
she left. She abandoned me, and then she really abandoned me for good
We're
when she
good.
died.
Mm.
And so for years, starting in my teens, I overlapped relationships because
Uh,
I had an abandonment issue. I'm going to
right.
leave them before they leave me.
Or if they
Because
leave you, you've got the backup already in tow. Right.
exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. That's what I meant. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I already have somebody in the back just in case, and
Hmm.
that went all the way to my first marriage.
Hmm.
And then as going to therapy, I started to recognize this, and then my next marriage, the way the trauma bond came out in that relationship was, I was holding on to the crumbs of the relationship, meaning, yeah, she was exactly what I wanted, and this is how we met, and oh, there she is, that part that I
Hmm.
really wanted. And it got so far, the disparity of what was good and what was not good was just getting larger and larger, and I was holding on for the little crumbs.
Yeah.
And I would get a crumb and I go, ah, there she is, so I can stay in this relationship. This is after learning all about my abandonment stuff and not, having someone on the side
But that fear is still in there. That
of
that
abandonment.
fear of not having someone, of being abandoned again.
Exactly.
Right.
So my trauma bond was abandonment, and so I would hang on much longer than I should have been in that relationship, in order to get that. And so it was like a
Mm.
roller coaster ride, or up and down, and it was exhausting. And until I realized that's what was happening, I had to end the relationship, and not because I didn't love her. It was just it wasn't healthy. I couldn't do it anymore. And I actually felt like, excuse me, I actually felt like that she had broken up with me because I didn't really want to break up, but I had to.
Right.
So it was just, that's how confusing trauma bonding can be. And it can be other issues as well, but that's just an example of how these traumas that we've been through influence how we interact in a relationship. And so we attach ourselves, because we've been through a trauma, and that makes the attachment unhealthy.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. I'm still upset for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
My,
I've been through it and I've told the story, but yeah,
yeah.
it's hard, man. It's really hard. Yeah.
I had a little different story growing up. My mother and father divorced when I was 2. She remarried instantly.
Hmm.
Divorced when I was 9, remarried right away again.
Hmm.
And then I didn't see my biological father 45 years,
Hmm.
so at the age of 10, I'd already had 3 fathers in different homes, different schools. And I wondered why I was always latching on to mentors. It
Yeah.
came clear to me later in life. I mean, I've spent my entire life, well, from age of 9 on in martial arts of all different kinds, and I traveled all through Asia,
Hmm.
studying with different masters, and looked almost like glommed onto every one of them as I was thinking a master and mentor, but really probably a father figure until I
Yeah.
figured it out. And there was all kinds of disappointments because I was looking and asking of them, not actually verbally asking from them, but from what I was seeking in them was something that was not their business to give me, or why would they give that to me?
Right. But
There's
that
no
inner
need for
child
it.
wanted that inside of you.
But my
Yeah.
inner child needed that completely.
Sure.
And but her third husband, my who I consider my only father,
Hmm.
was 42 years before, he passed away a few years ago, but that was my
Right.
father.
Mhm.
But
Glad
I
you had
was
that experience.
Me too. And but yeah, I know it's like, moving through that many parents, that many parental
Oh, yeah.
figures in a short amount of time was tough, was rough.
Sure it is.
And
Yeah.
I didn't realize I had those issues of seeking that in other people. Like we don't realize these things that we do that to fill the psychic void or emotional void or of some
Yeah.
kind.
And that's the thing. It's the subconscious behavior, and we're not
Hmm.
even aware that we're doing it. And that's why it's so important to have a mentor or,
Hmm.
coach or therapist or
Right.
maybe someone from your, religious community or whatever, to be able to reflect that back to you and give you some feedback so you can see that inside yourself, because most of the time we don't see it.
Yeah.
And when we trust someone to give us that feedback and take it in, that's where the growth begins.
Yeah. What are love cons? You did a post about love cons, and I'm like, okay, we got to
Uh,
ask, we got to get into this.
Love cons are, it's when, and we think it's mostly guys doing this, but it goes both ways where you're taking advantage of someone's vulnerability in order to gain, and usually it's money. They say everything, they're charming, and they pull you in, and then they start to ask for certain things. And
Mm.
oftentimes it happens online where they haven't even met.
Like
And
those
so,
phishing scams, those
yeah,
catfishing.
well, yeah, it's similar to that. And so, yet they're tugging at the heartstrings.
Yeah.
And then they establish some sort of trust with you, and then they say, hey, I'm having this medical procedure done and I need money, or I've got to travel to another country to do this, or I'm going to lose my house, some tragic story that they tell, and then they get hooked on that and they start sending them money. And oftentimes after a while, it's going okay, and they may ask for more money, and then ultimately they get ghosted,
Yeah.
and then they're heartbroken, and also their bank accounts drained. Yeah,
Yeah. So there's a certain type, I mean, it happens to men and women, but there's a certain void that needs to be filled where they need to believe that that person is really in love with them and that now they can be the knight in shining armor too, right? And they can
yeah,
bail them out of their problem. And I've been there, wanting to over help to compensate for my feelings of unworthiness. Like I got to keep proving my worth, and I will save them again and again. And
yeah. That's very typical, and it's also someone who may be very insecure,
hmm.
and maybe didn't have much experience with the opposite sex or dating. and someone shows attention, and then it just, it strokes their ego. They feel good. They're, excited. I think about, like strip clubs. Perfect example of, these guys go in and, the strippers are trying to do is get more money, and they'll say anything and smile, and, and so the guys go, oh wow, and they think they're really interested in them, and, boom. And so it's similar to that. It's
Yeah.
like, they get that attention, and oh my God, this beautiful woman is interested in me, my gosh, and they want to hold on to that, and it becomes like a fantasy.
Mm.
And so they've lost touch with reality at that point. And because they're so desperate and they want it so bad, then they're willing to do these things, give money or whatever the support they're asking for. And that's tragic. It makes me sad, to think about men who've been taken advantage of, women too, that anyone would do that, to take emotional advantage of someone and then financial advantage. It's a horrible thing. But there are ways to deal with that. That, like I said, when I met my wife, we did a lot of, not even talking on the phone yet, back and forth emails back then. And we got a strong sense of each other. But the main thing is you got to meet that person in person.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what the love con will do is to isolate you, keep you from your friends and family, because they may give you feedback that would say, avoid this person. So then the more isolated they become, the more vulnerable they become. So that's
Mm.
why it's so important to let your friends and family be aware of who you're talking to, and they don't have to know all your business, but to be open and talk about what's going on, and because oftentimes, and I know from my own experience, I don't want to care what anybody else says. I just want to be with this person.
Right.
We don't really listen openly to what other people have to say. But if they're noticing something's not right and they're telling you that, then, pay attention to that.
I think that's true too. Not even, I mean, extended past love cons, because we see in other people's relationships, our friends, our children's, everybody can see their partner is not right for them except for them. It's how many, you can't hammer that person again and again with these outside observations. They start getting resentful, and you sometimes got to watch people that you love fall.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't, just harp on it all the time. It's just, sharing what you see, the way I would say it is, hey, listen, I just noticed something and I wonder if you're interested in some feedback about Mark.
Mhm.
That gives them a chance to open the door for you to give that feedback.
Yeah.
And so they have a choice, well, I appreciate it, but no, I don't want to hear it. Or yeah, go ahead. And most of the time they say yeah. And then you offer that feedback, and then you just kind of have to wipe your hands from that because they're going to do what they're going to do. But
Right.
you've planted a seed in their mind,
Mm.
and it may work and it may not. But if they're being forced to isolate, then they're in trouble.
Yeah. Do you think that social media can play, I mean, I think the answer is yes, a negative role in relationships, even among people who are well matched, because of all the distraction and that they're pulled away into something that's not really real?
Absolutely. I did a podcast episode on that very topic, and
Mhm.
there's some good things in social media that couples can bond around. Sending each other memes and different reels that are funny or something that's touching, something that reminds them of their relationship. So there's some positive stuff in there.
Yeah.
But the real issue is the distraction of that social media, and especially I'd say with men, but again, it goes both ways, where there's a lot of titillizing type of behavior that and I've been drawn into it myself, and I'm like,
Yeah.
damn, they're showing this on social media,
Right.
and And then my wife, realized that, and I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I got to respect her, but if you're not aware and you
Right.
get sucked into it because it's built that way. It's built to suck you in and keep you there over and over
Right.
and then keep giving you stuff that you want to see. So if it's, sexually oriented or anything that's going to take you away from the relationship, then yeah, it's a bad thing.
Hmm.
And again, it's going back to the awareness of that. And, and it's talking about it with your spouse or partner too. Like, do you mind if I, see this young girl in a bikini on social media, or does that disturb you? Well, the fact that you're asking, that means a lot. And no, I would prefer you not looking at that.
Right.
And then you get to decide whether you want to do it or not. But, talking about it, if she's like, oh, I don't care, that doesn't bother me, but don't look at porn or whatever. It's just talking about it, being open so that you feel free to do whatever you know is right in that situation.
Yeah. I think one thing that I found myself, especially with my new wife, 15 years with my new wife,
Right.
is not feeling a sense of guilt or shame or that I'm hiding something.
Exactly.
I mean, because that's really hard around someone that you love
Yes.
and that you want to be open and honest and playful, but you got to be worried not to say something or they don't find something. Even if it's like looking at the bikini girl, when you asked, she said no, and you did anyway because you were curious or you couldn't not do it.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
what kind of I imagine that all different kinds of guilt and shame can really mar a relationship. Are there ways to identify these things for men that they can identify whether those things are negatively impacting the relationship and how to identify what they are,
Yeah,
perhaps?
I want to make the distinction between guilt and shame. Guilt is usually behavior driven. I'm guilty because I looked at the girl in the bikini.
Yeah.
And shame is there must be something wrong with me because I did that.
Ah,
So, and they kind of go hand in hand. So usually it's the behavior that causes the guilt, and then you feel ashamed because there's
okay.
something wrong. Um, and I think it goes back to what I was saying about awareness. You know, um, guilt is deep, and shame is deep. And if you feel like you have to hide something, that's a red flag right there.
Yeah.
If you have to go behind her back, and all that's just going to build and build and build. And so the guilt of doing it and then the shame of feeling so bad that you did it just builds and builds and builds. And whether you say anything or not, whether she finds what you're hiding or not, that energy is in the relationship.
Right.
She feels it. It's there. And she may not know exactly what it is, excuse me, but she knows something's not right. And you know something's not right.
I was like, you really know, so like, how can you
Right.
sleep and feel relaxed around your loved one? You know,
Exactly. And
it's
so
really
the
hard.
relationship starts to drift apart. You look at distractions to keep you from having to deal with that, and then it just pulls apart. And drifting apart is one of the most detrimental things in a relationship
Yeah.
because it's really hard to get back on track if you've really separated
Yeah.
and withdrawn in the relationship. So yeah, and so if you've done stuff in the past is the past. We can't do anything about that. So it's how am I going to be moving forward?
Hmm.
What am I committed to in this relationship? And I have to say, and I think this is what you were saying, that I feel more free in this relationship than I've ever felt in my life.
Yeah.
I'm free to be me. I don't have to hide and be somebody I'm not or hide someone that I'm with or whatever. It's like I just get to be me and she loves me in spite of it. I'm like, damn,
Go figure, man. Go
how about
figure.
that? And so I can sleep really well at night and
Yeah.
my shoulders are relaxed and it's all good. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. So I think one of the things that men have to decide is that if they're going to respect their partner enough to ask them if something's okay or objectionable, so
Mhm.
that they then have to stand by their partner's yes or no, because if they go against it, it's going to cause this guilt, and this starts the whole thing rolling. And when they get to shame, it's hard to have grace for yourself
Mhm.
when the guilt is there all the time, especially if you keep looking, right? I mean,
Yeah,
so I mean that's, I think, is a good point where a man would need a coach, or a
exactly.
therapist of some kind of to talk about these things in private and work through them, or and then maybe seek, he and his partner together, or learn some tools, because if we don't know the tools, it's hard to make the change.
Yeah, I'm a part of a website called mensgroup.com. I'm a facilitator there. And I can't tell you how many men we have a porn addicts
No.
room, and it runs really deep, and and it's hard for women to understand that. Some women to understand it. Women have it too, again, but predominantly men. And whether it's porn or any other type of addiction, it requires some sort of intervention and help,
Yeah.
and support. It's really, really hard to do it by yourself. And so when you're holding all that in, it just drains the life out of you. And so to open up and get that support, and then open up to your spouse to say, listen, I have this issue. And, hopefully she'll stick around and, support you as you do the work, as you grow and get that support. So handle that issue. And again, that's all you can really ask for,
Right.
and hope that you'll get that support. But to continually to do it and feel that guilt and shame, it's going to drive the relationship apart, whether without even talking about it.
Yeah. You said you need to do it with help, and that brings me to like the 12-step programs. That reminds me of, that you need the help of the other people in the programs, you need the help of God or the divine or something. And so, it brings me to asking your opinion on the role of spirituality in relationships, not just for the man, but is it necessary for both to be spiritually focused in the same direction, even if it's a non-direction?
I mean, it certainly helps.
Yeah.
I tell a story. I did a podcast on that topic, and
Mm,
tell the story of a couple who she was Catholic and I think he was Protestant. I'm not sure, or so. Anyway, she was very religious and she wanted, Catholic wedding. She wanted all this, to have
right.
that she wasn't going to marry him because he wasn't Catholic. And he was, when she finally had the guts to talk to him about it and say, listen, this is what I need, he was open and said, yeah, I mean, I've been going to church and I'm kind of digging the rituals. And he was like, yeah, because he believed in God. They both believed in God and, the
Right.
Christianity, yet it was just a different approach.
Yeah.
And so in that case, it worked out great.
Mm,
But I mean, I'm seeing relationships where it's Christian and Jewish. Okay, well, then the common denominator is God,
right.
and then what can we do to support each other's spiritual growth?
Right.
If someone's an atheist and the other person's spiritual, well, maybe the spirituality is a sense of purpose,
Right.
in the world, or just being kind to one another. It's finding the mutual ground so that you can grow your relationship around it. You know, um, they say, couples who pray together stay together. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean religious prayer. It could
Right.
be a mantra, it could be a meditation, but something that creates a sense of commonality for a higher power or something greater than themselves, so that they can both bond around that. And the research shows that couples who do have that spiritual connection tend to be more emotionally vulnerable and sustain a long-term relationship for
So
them.
again, like coming back to the beginning of the conversation, it's like setting expectations and having these open conversations, like you and your current wife, you know,
Mhm.
conversing about what's real and what we need before you even bother meeting.
Yeah,
It's so
it's
important.
and I know that goes against a lot of what goes on today.
Yeah.
And people may think, oh, that's old fashioned, old head, or whatever. Look, man, it's just what's real. And I hear so many people, men, women, saying, oh God, it's all about hooking up, having friends with benefits. Nobody really wants to do this, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you want a long-term relationship, then you got to do some work.
Yeah.
And do the work, it changes everything. And, give yourself that gift because I'm
Yeah.
so glad I did. I mean, I went through 3 divorces and I don't have any regrets because I learned so much along the way. My wife had a similar journey, not 3 divorces. She'd been divorced in another long-term relationship, but we had these parallel experiences that we both had to go through in order to be where we are today.
Yeah.
And we often joke and say, we were 10 days apart. We were the same
Oh,
age.
really? Wow.
We're saying like, all right, when we were born, we're like, okay, we're going to meet in 50 years and we're going to come back and we're going to go through a bunch of mess and we're going to come back
Come back. Right.
and have this amazing relationship.
Nice.
And here we are.
Yeah. My wife and I are only April, May, June, 2 months apart.
Mm.
Uh, April, yeah, June. So same age. And I think being with somebody in your age range, whatever that means, is important too because of
Yeah.
education, life experience, outlook on life, your station, where you are, what you expect, what you want.
Hmm.
Um, you know,
And you can remember songs that you used to listen to that when you were the same age at 17,
right,
instead of someone 20 years younger and you're like, who is that?
right,
Yeah.
right. My son did a thing. He's 27 now, but I remember he had to make a video recording for social studies class or something. Ask your parents about Y2K, and it's like, okay, that was like, say, 15 years ago from that point,
Right.
from when he was asking, but it just seems like yesterday.
I know.
I
Like,
mean, we were
how
just
can
getting
you
the
not
duct
remember
tape and the
that?
gallons of water. What do you mean? Right? And already it's 26 years ago. Like, that's insane. So when I see relationships with young women and older guys, you
Mhm.
know, I just like it's for two different things. Probably she wants money and a set life, and he wants somebody young and hot, and nothing else in between. The brains is going to connect because you know, there's
Yeah.
too much history there missing.
Yeah, I think for the most part, you're right, and it's really an individual thing,
Yeah,
and it all depends. I mean, I know happily married folks that are 20 years difference and, you just keep going on. But
perfect.
yeah, a lot of the stereotype is, the older guy, is middle age or, that midlife crisis and he wants to be attractive to younger women
Yeah,
and there could be some lack of growth there, or maybe they find a real connection.
yeah,
I'm not going to argue, not to do that as long as they're really committed to the growth of the relationship.
yeah.
If they're there for each other and it works, great. And we get together for different reasons, and if it's to be financially secure and that works for both of you, okay, as long as it works.
As long as it works, that's the point,
But
right?
one person's doing it for love and the other person's doing it for money. That's when you're going to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the divine masculine? I I jumped ahead. I meant to ask that while we were talking about spirituality. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I refer to the divine masculine as like this the noble man, like the highest
mm,
version of yourself
yeah.
as a human being. And yeah, you could say from a spiritual perspective, and yet it's just really about being the best man you can be. And that's how I've kind of simplified it. And when it comes to our conditioning as men, there's the lack of vulnerability again. We got to be strong. That's weakness. All the things, and we can maintain all of our masculine qualities, our strength and determination, and all these things, and bring in some of the divine feminine.
Hmm.
Because we have it each of us have both within us.
Right.
And we're coming, and we're, I'm going to get really woo woo here, but we're in the age of Aquarius, and
That's right.
it's coming in, man, and the divine feminine is returning because of all the corruptness and all the patriarchy and all this stuff that's happened. Now we're coming into this divine feminine, and that's part of my mission, my love mission for men on the path to love, is to find that balance from those strong masculine qualities to embrace vulnerability, to embrace empathy. It's just adding to the mix instead of taking away and becoming feminine. It's creating a balance of the masculine and feminine within us so we can all get along,
Yeah.
and we can see each other, hear each other, validate each other, love each other. And that, in a nutshell, is when I refer to the divine masculine is being the best man you can be and embrace those divine feminine qualities as well.
Oh, that's terrific. If there's a couple of takeaways or key pointers that you could offer men, different ages, dating till retirement, who are looking for love, haven't found it, or keep breaking up or having failed relationships, whoever's fault it is, that some takeaways that they can start thinking about, um, to kind of start looking how to put themselves in their order, because you had talked about that in the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah, it's about it's about looking at your history and your past and your patterns, noticing, being really open, being aware, being honest with yourself. Excuse me. Being honest with yourself with those patterns. It's having compassion for yourself, for those what you might call failures. Those three divorces of mine, man. Yeah, I could see there were failures, but no, it got me closer to where I am today.
Yeah.
So you can have compassion for the pain that you've suffered in relationship and maybe through the traumas in your life, and really be open to healing, to get support, to talk about what's going on inside of you, to be vulnerable, to be able to express what I feel, what I need, and to have empathy, to listen and to really listen to understand versus listening to be defensive or to say your piece. These things, come into play, and it starts with you first. And I remember, man, after I went through a divorce, I had this big 27-room house, and I ended up on the floor in my living room with my dog. We had four kids.
Oh,
She had three. We had one together, and I was so alone in this huge house, except for my
yeah.
dog. And I just wailed on the living room floor, feeling so alone. But it was what broke the ice and me
Mm.
healing because I had to be okay with me. I had to be by myself
Right.
to learn to love myself, to have grace, and to have a good relationship with myself so I could take that to my next relationship. So it starts with us first, loving yourself first, doing all that you can for that, and then take that to your relationship and be committed to your growth and find someone who's committed as well, and they will evolve like you and your wife and evolve together, and hopefully have a long lasting sustainable relationship.
Yeah. Great advice. And there's a lot of steps in there,
Oh
and
yeah,
a
and
lot
it
of
takes time
accountability,
and be patient too.
a lot of accountability to be had,
No
because
doubt.
usually people want to just jump to another relationship, but also they want to blame the other person, right? She's at fault or
Exactly.
he's at
Wow.
fault, and they're the problem. What's wrong with people? And I think if anyone's got a string of relationships that haven't worked out, there's a potential that the fault lies with them. And
Well,
so to
yeah,
all the brothers out there,
yeah,
if and I'm sure you've been here, if you're like, why is these relationships keep not working? I'm going to give up. What is wrong with me? What's wrong with women or guys? However you want to go,
right.
find a mentor, find a coach. And Bill Simpson, we're going to put your information in the show notes.
Awesome.
Your podcast links, the place where you're working, the men's group that you had mentioned online, all of
Right.
those resources there, so our listeners and viewers can reach out for some advice or set up a consultation or an appointment. I think it's really important. If I hadn't done those therapy sessions with my wife, there's no way that I would be here this much. She would have, I would have been out, and broken again and again. It was all these women, they're crazy. I can't find, why. Of course, I'm awesome. Why can't they all see it and treat me like, the stories
Well,
we tell ourselves?
I commend you for taking the step to do that. And so many men are terrified because they're going to think that it's all their fault,
Yeah.
and whatever reason it is that they're scared. But let me tell you, that to have the strength and courage to do what you did, look what happened. You guys are in a great place in your relationship.
Oh, and by the way, I meant to ask you, I know that you practice Tai Chi, and I was
Yeah,
wondering if there's something within Tai Chi, because we did talk on the fringes, we were talking philosophically a little about yin and yang, right? Having a piece
yeah,
of the feminine inside the masculine and vice versa, like the symbol,
exactly.
but and being able to yield and but being strong when you need to. And I wonder if there are what were some of the things that may have spilled over from there philosophically that came to you in
Yeah.
your coaching and into your life.
Yeah, I think about, you mentioned a couple, but I think about in Tai Chi, we call it listening because when we
Yeah,
do push hands, you're listening for where their energy is going to shift so
right,
you can move. And so being able to listen, for to empathize, listen to understand, that's another principle there from Tai Chi.
yeah,
Um, and that we don't force, we go with the flow. And so if you're trying to be right and you're using your force to be right and that's your goal is to be right, well, you're not flowing, you're just using force against force
right.
because he wants to be right, you want to be right, you want to be right, boom 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 boom. But when you say, well, what's my goal here is to connect, okay, well then let's go with the flow and let that flow be the common denominator that we want this relationship to work.
Mm,
So then what do we need to do that? We need to listen. We need to, do all the things I've talked about. You know,
yeah.
those are just a few off the top of my head.
Wonderful, wonderful epilogue to our
Yes.
premature ending. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you again, Bill. I really appreciate your time and sharing these things with me and with our viewers and listeners. It's really
Well,
been a pleasure speaking with you.
yeah, and it's been great to reconnect with you after all these years, and
Yeah,
I appreciate you reaching out to have me on as a guest. I'm here anytime you want me, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
wonderful. Thanks, Bill.